Buying a home is likely one of the biggest investments you will ever make, and if you're moving to a new state, this can be a pretty complicated process. Today we're going to talk about best practices and mistakes to avoid making when moving to South Carolina. I have witnessed some of these mistakes firsthand, and it's my job as your real estate agent to help guide you away from some of these pitfalls. So what do you need to know before buying a home? One of the biggest mistakes people make is putting themselves in a position where they become house poor. You may have heard the saying, marry the house, date the rate. While that sentiment works for some home buyers, it's not always the best advice if you are working with a very tight budget. The meaning behind saying that is that you should buy the house that you love and the one that fits your needs best, and not worry too much on the interest rate you are paying in order to buy the home, with the goal of refinancing to a lower interest rate at a later time. Now this makes sense if the monthly payment, while at a higher interest rate, is still well within your budget and doesn't stretch you thin financially, because there's no guarantee the interest rates will go down or on a timeline of when you can expect to be able to refinance. One thing I would suggest is to avoid buying a house that is at the top end of your budget unless you have already made adjustments to your price point you're looking at to account for the higher interest rate. You do not want to put yourself in a position where your mortgage payment is bleeding you dry and leaving you with nothing left over to spend for the rest of the month. You need to take a hard look at your spending habits and make sure that your mortgage payment at this level will allow you to live the lifestyle you have been living, or decide if you are willing to scale back your spending in other areas to accommodate this. Oftentimes people will stretch themselves thin just to be in a certain town or school district or within a certain distance from family members or a job, when they could live 5 or 10 minutes away farther in a different town where they wouldn't have to pay so much for a home. One of the best ways to figure out what price point you should be shopping in is to figure out what you can afford as far as a monthly payment goes, and then work backwards from there. A great lender will help you calculate what this looks like in the terms of purchase price. That way we know to make sure we are at or below the number to make sure you are comfortable with your monthly payment. And if you've always been a renter and you have never bought before, you also need to take into consideration that you will need emergency funds for or if and when something goes wrong in the house, because you can't just call your landlord when the AC goes out. Now it's your problem, so you don't want to drain all your savings when something goes wrong. Another big mistake I see people make, especially those who are relocating here, is limiting themselves to one specific town or area. People will create these very strict parameters of where they want to be when just a short drive into the next town over could save them significant amounts of money, while still being close enough to access all the amenities that were drawing them to that other area to begin with. Sometimes I'll get people who are open to a 40-45 minute drive to work, and I know that making this drive twice a day, Monday through Friday, is going to get very old quickly. Now on the flip side of that, people want to move to the area to be close to family members and also set a certain commute time that they're willing to drive from those family members. Sometimes you can find a whole world of other options if you are willing to drive an extra 10 minutes or so when you only go to visit her a couple of times a month. For example, you can buy a nicer, more affordable home 30 minutes away from her, as opposed to a less desirable house that costs much more money, but is 10 minutes closer for an occasional visit. I know that buying a house is a huge investment and you want to buy the one that you want, but if you have a very specific criteria that you don't have any flexibility on, this can make your home search very difficult and often eliminates a ton of really amazing properties from your search. I understand that some things are non-negotiable, such as a master on main, an accessible driveway, or even a fenced-in yard for the dogs. And while some characteristics of a home are permanent, many are not. Another criteria people often get hung up on is whether or not the home is on public sewer or septic. And the third mistake I'll mention is not spending enough time in the town that you are looking to buy in. Oftentimes what I recommend to clients coming into town from other parts of the country to visit is staying in an Airbnb, even oftentimes provide a number of sites and attractions and areas of town for them to explore in the time there so that they can get better acclimated to the area. My best piece of advice is, if you're in town buying a house here when you live in another state, is once you have found one that you think is the perfect house, maybe locate an Airbnb that's pretty close to the home and get a feel for what it's like to actually live there. Is the neighborhood on a busy road, and are you going to have to sit and wait 5 minutes or more to get out every time you try to leave the neighborhood? Does traffic getting to your office make your commute an hour long instead of 45 minutes according to the GPS? These are things that people don't figure out until they've already bought the home, so I would recommend trying to acclimate to the area before buying the house. All right, the next mistake we're going to talk about is connecting with who you think is the right lender. For example, I once had a buyer whose brother was a mortgage lender in California and primarily only dealt with loans for California-based clients. Of course, my client trusted his brother and wanted him to do their loan as opposed to someone else here locally, even though they know the process here better. Now, a lender can be licensed to work in several states, but every state does things a little bit differently, and the lending process and requirements in California are very different from those here in South Carolina. Because of his lack of knowledge on how things work here in South Carolina, he ended up messing things up with the loan, and we had to delay closing, which caused quite a fiasco because everyone had already had moving trucks and was ready for closing. The sellers were vacating the home the day of closing, and they needed that money to purchase their next home. It really put a damper on things because the lender didn't know what he was doing in our case. Of course, people are drawn to having family members or friends who they have known for a long time help them with the major purchase, like buying a house, but that doesn't always mean that they are the best person for the job. I know if these clients had worked with my recommended local vendors, we would not have run into these same issues and would have been able to close on time without any major concerns. There have been many times where buyers have been adamant that they have a great relationship with their personal bank and they want to use them to apply for the loan. And then after several weeks of unanswered phone calls or poor communication, they take me up on my offer for a highly recommended local lender who's going to make their purchase a top priority. I got an email the other day from a client who went through this entire scenario and said, I can now see firsthand how I've experienced all the bad things you mentioned in our consultation about big national banks. I don't say this to say I told you so, but after working in this field and going through as many different transactions as I have many firsthand experiences from the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I want to take and share these experiences with you to help you avoid those from the start. It is very important to work with people who are highly knowledgeable about the area as well as the process and know how best to serve you. You need someone working to help you that knows the ins and outs of the entire process in order to serve you best. If you are looking to relocate to South Carolina from another state, that is what I specialize in. Just last year, I helped over 40 families do exactly that. I know how to work with people who are new to the state, whether you are coming here for jobs or lifestyle or just to be closer to family. Whether you have a home to sell in your current state and need to coordinate the sale of that home in order to purchase here, or if you already closed and are ready to buy with cash or are currently renting, and this will be your first purchase. I know how to help you make this process as smooth and as easy as possible. Relocating to a new state is a huge process and it can be very stressful, and there's a lot more involved than just buying a home. So you need an agent that knows how to best guide you. And if the upstate of South Carolina is the place you've settled on, I hope to be your realtor of choice. However, if you choose a different location, I'd love to be your resource for information and can make recommendations for a phenomenal agent to serve you. And again, thanks for watching this video, and if you would like to share other mistakes that you've either experienced or witnessed, comment below. And to stay up to date with more lists or videos, be sure to subscribe and follow.